Morning, Botai. 2 days ago, we spoke about adding spices to a kli sheni. Like we said, you're not allowed to put anything that's raw, anything that's uncooked, including spices or anything else, into a kli rishon, into a pot where food was cooked, whether it's on the fire or off the fire and still remains yad soledet bo, because that would constitute cooking. That's why we said, according to Sfaradim at least, person has to be makpid to only put spices into a kli sheni and further. The Gemara says that there are two exceptions to that. Every single food cooks in a kli rishon, besides for two things. The Gemara says, milcha uvisra de Torah, which means salt and ox meat. Those things are very tough and requires very intensive cooking. And therefore, once the pot, kli rishon, that's removed from the fire, you're allowed to put those things into that pot. It will not get cooked. The only time those things will get cooked is when the kli rishon is still on the fire or the heat source, because when it's on the fire, everything in the world can cook, no matter how tough it is. Therefore, salt is the only exception to spices, whereas if you take a pot of cholent off the fire and you see it's missing spices, you still can't put it into that pot because it's still a kli rishon until you transfer it into a kli sheni. With regards to salt, once it's off the fire, the Gemara says that it's mutar. Now that was Bizman Gemara when most salt was not cooked. Nowadays, most salts that we have, table salts and sea salts and things like that, most salts on the market today are pre-cooked. They already cook it in order to form it, especially with regards to sea salt. They take seawater and then they boil it and evaporate the water until they're left with the salt, so it's already cooked. Over there, once the salt is cooked, en bishul achar bishul biyavesh. Now the salt is it's a solid food, and therefore even to add it to a pot that's on the plata or on the blech, which means it's sitting on the heat source, would still be mutar because there's no cooking. At the end of the day, it's already cooked. The only difference would be, the exception would be by salts, specialty salts and things like that, like all sorts of, you have to check whether colorful salts and things like that are cooked before. But regular table salts and sea salts are all cooked before, but other ones I'm not so sure. You'd have to do some research to see if those specific companies, the salt is cooked before, and then it would revert back to the din Gemara. That would be asur if it wasn't cooked, the salt. It would be asur when it's on the fire or on the heat source, but once it's off, then it would be mutar, like the Gemara says about salt and ox meat. That's with regards to the difference between salt and other spices that we spoke about the other day. Yom Tov and Shabbat Shalom.